everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Ensuring Operational Safety from Within, Leveraging Proactive Worker Insight to Reduce Operations Risk. From production to safety, workers play a central part within operations, yet technology, processes, and policies often focus on the elements to be done instead of the workers doing them. Across industries, the role of workers and worker-centric processes are becoming the crux of maintaining a competitive advantage, profitability, and ultimately sustainability. This webinar will cover the top challenges facing plant, operations, and HSE managers in today's digital world, the current state of operations, risk and safety management, and methods for creating a culture of safety for reduced risk, improved safety, increased shareholder value, and sustainable operational excellence. A few reminders before we begin. We want this to be an interactive session, so if you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them using your GoToWebinar console. We have planned time at the end of the webinar to answer questions. If we do not get to all of the questions, we will respond to you individually via email. As a reminder, the session is being recorded. A link to the recording will be sent once available on the website, usually within 2 to 3 business days.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. So whether in our personal life or in business, we either read about or feel directly the impacts that operational failures have in business and potential effects that may occur in those communities in which they operate. In the United States alone, the cost of failure is noteworthy. According to OSHA, when it comes to safety and the risks associated with managing a business, the effects are significant for all workers, employees and contractors alike. At a global level, statistically unveiled at the World Congress on Safety and Health at Work, delegates estimated that almost 3 million workers die annually due to work-related injuries and illness. From a regulatory perspective, the relatively new levels in which fines can be levied have more significance than ever, particularly for those designated as willful violations. And possibly of greatest impact to a business are the negative effects on brand and reputation that many companies face when the public is made aware of failures, whether small or significant. In both cases, the costs are real. So let's take a quick look at the cost of safety failures to business. When speaking of the financial impacts to business, the direct and indirect costs of safety and operations failures are quite consequential. In the United States alone, these costs are a staggering $254 billion. When you expand our view to the global landscape, we see the overall global financial impacts exceeding $725 billion. Quite amazing cost for business to absorb. From this, we can more easily see the impact that such failures have not only on the bottom line, but directly to shareholder value. At the same World Congress on Health and Safety, delegates discussed that when you add the cost borne by individuals and governments, real costs represent almost 4% of the global GDP, or gross domestic product. This equates to almost $3 trillion. From a risk perspective, many sources often attribute operational failures to human error. There was inadequate information, fatigue, inconsistencies, or just poor decision-making, which ultimately caused the failure or safety incident. This begs the question, if human error still plays a large part in the cause of these safety and risk incidents, shouldn't today's safety and operations risk strategies address the workforce issue more successfully? Conversely, if today's strategies focus on the processes and policies within an operation and not the workers actually executing them, then it makes sense that human error would still be attributed as a main cause of incidents and failures. To best impact safety and operational risk management strategies, organizations must better capture insights from across the workforce and operational processes, events, and things. Only by capturing these combined insights, processing them, and then communicating back to the workforce in a timely fashion will there be a sustainable impact on a company's safety and risk strategies, policies, programs, and practices. To do so effectively, though, requires more than communication and training programs. A worker-centric strategy requires an ongoing dialogue across an organization. It requires a dialogue to occur far beyond management alone. The statistics show this. According to Gallup research, top-performing worker-centric businesses which effectively engage the workforce far outperform their competitors, as we see here, where leading practice companies not only enjoy an almost 50% reduction in safety incidents, but over 20% improvements in both productivity and profitability. I'm sure we've all heard and understand the benefits and value of culture as a core element in safer and less risky operations. The National Safety Council has outlined these elements all organizations should manage to achieve this. However, do these elements really have the long-lasting and sustainable effects needed? Research shows successful workforce participation is a critical element in the financial success of an organization and serves as a major competitive market differentiators for companies that do it well. Bain & Company researched companies across 60 countries and found several common trends. The first, workforce engagement scores decline with worker tenure, meaning that workers with the deepest knowledge of the company typically are the least engaged. And second, workforce collaboration scores decline as you move down the organizational chart. So, highly engaged senior executives are likely to underestimate the discontent on the front lines. While it is a common challenge for businesses around the world, what does it take to achieve success in workforce engagement and collaboration? As the late management guru Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture can only be sustained when workforce engagement and collaboration are implemented and aligned with the business in a structured, workforce-centric management model. It takes organizations to realize they must transform beyond our traditional compliance reporting management model to one that is stakeholder and workforce-centric based. Only then will companies move to a position that leads to real shareholder value, which at the end of the day is the one key metric that both our CEOs and board of directors focus on. The cause, effects, and challenges have become more complex as the optics continue to gain more and more visibility. In addition to the ever-increasing global regulatory climate we face, we continue to see the influences on brand, reputation, and even broader stakeholder pressures only growing. To best address all of these issues, a journey of transformation must take place. A journey that takes an organization from one focused on operational compliance to one that achieves operational excellence in a consistent and sustainable fashion. To do this, the workforce must be front and center. In this journey, there are 4 key pain points that must be managed. Ensure safe, secure, and reliable operations to optimize your risk management strategies. Maximize operational efficiencies by aligning integration and information management practices. Prevent unplanned events by ensuring asset integrity. And leveraging the workforce and all stakeholders through organizational effectiveness. All four of these components are, in reality, interrelated and codependent, where continued alignment is necessary to ensure success. This is usually managed and maintained by our people in the workforce. This alignment at a high level is driven by effectively managing the four key demographics that drive operational failure. These are equipment, such as type, use, age, asset management practices, history, and so on. Process, those business practices and programs. In other words, the way things are supposed to be done to manage risk. Environment, factors that influence your work environment from weather to operating conditions, such as noise, vibration, surfaces in which we execute our day-to-day jobs. And finally, people, those employees and contractors and each of their unique characteristics that make up your workforce at all levels. Traditional investments in managing these demographics have primarily had most success in those programs focused on equipment, process, and environment. Why? Well, quite simply, because in relative terms, they tend to be easier to contain and control. Though investments have certainly been made on the people side, success has been more challenging to achieve because, well, we're talking about people. Individuals with different thought processes, backgrounds, and cognitive abilities. In those situations in which less severe failures occur, it is typical that only one of these demographics is involved. However, for the more severe, and particularly those perfect storm failures, several, if not all, of these demographics come together at once. To address these demographics in the past, companies have deployed legacy solutions, which are typically built by and structured for our subject matter experts and managers. They're not always aligned with what is actually taking place in the business and are most often reactive in nature. Today, when we speak of safety, it typically starts at and is focused around process. Solutions often fail to proactively and continuously integrate the people piece as a core transformational component. This is their worker-centric approach. We're suggesting that organizations look to shift the current management paradigm so there is a greater balance between process and people. Doing so will allow organizations to innovate and bridge their current gaps between process and practice and bring strategy in better alignment with execution. This is the power of implementing a workforce-centric approach to operational excellence. A true workforce-centric approach to safety and operations risk management has four primary elements. To enable a continuous and on-demand dialogue with all workers so they may communicate and provide critical insights long before failures occur. Activate a management-initiated process to communicate to and gain critical insights from the entire workforce, from management to the shop floor. To foster continuous and active participation in leadership through transparency and ownership of safety and risk management. And finally, to facilitate knowledge sharing across workers with common interests, skills, and work focus areas. True and sustainable workforce empowerment allows you to move from a reactive state of understanding to one in which insights from across the entire workforce are captured proactively. This is when risk is truly managed. To capture proactive, actionable insights from across your workforce, we see these three operational phases. The first is collection. This is the phase in which data is captured in a closed loop, continuous, and integrated fashion throughout the organization and directly from the workforce, including employees, contractors, service providers, auditors, and seconded employees. From data collection, we go to contextualization. Here, when the captured content is aligned with how an organization actually operates, by bringing together additional data sets, systems, and processes, creating operational insights that reflect the real business. And then operational realization, the phase where those proactive operational insights are applied across the business to create real value to the organization, translating insight into tangible results and communicating them throughout the workforce to achieve true operational effectiveness. To create a true culture of safety in which all workers assume personal ownership in this transformation journey to operational excellence, we suggest the following best practices to maximize this journey. Instill a workforce-centric safety and operations risk management strategy across all levels of your organization. Culture may start with leadership, but leadership is achieved by the workers. Capture proactively those critical, real-time, actionable operational insights and make this information available to all workers through a program of transparency. Foster a safety culture by empowering all workers to take responsibility and ownership. Identify and nurture your true leaders and let them foster future leaders and success. Integrate seamlessly with existing infrastructure and processes for complete context. Proactive, actionable insights are only as valuable as the context you create across all of your relevant information sources. Adhere to the strictest security and data privacy protocols. In today's environment, embarking on this worker-centric strategy will require that you not only continue your information management security controls, but expand this to enable and communicate to workers the privacy of their participation and data provided. Empowerment is only achieved through ownership and personal responsibility. A worker-centric approach allows any organization to do this and benefit by gaining those insights from an engaged workforce that will dramatically impact your safety and operations risk management practices and results. How? Well, by essentially taking more of a social crowdsourcing approach to this business challenges that leverages the sum total of an engaged workforce to empower all workers at every level to make more intelligent operational decisions with less risk by proactively capturing and sharing those critical, real-time, actionable operational insights. And in doing so, reduce operational failures and improve safety across the whole of the business. With My Safety, organizations are able to empower their workers through a closed-loop process of engagement, communication, and collaboration, so that each individual is able to take real ownership of the safety and operations risk management agenda. Now, I'd like to walk you through the background on the use case scenario you're now looking at, where we can see that the transformation to a sustainable, workforce-centric empowerment strategy can make a difference. This international energy company had experienced a history of operational safety failures. These failures were not only impacting daily production schedules, but also causing increased scrutiny from regulatory bodies and the public in general. In response to this, the CEO directed the organization to become much more focused on reducing these failures through a series of company-wide programs, which included implementing a structured and continuous safety communication program, deploying an integrated legacy environmental health and safety management solution, and finally, enhancing training on operational safety policies and practices for all workers. After several years, these efforts did show improvements in operational safety performance, but the company overall was still facing many of the same challenges as before, and improvements began to decline. A story we have heard often over the past 5 years. The company embarked on an effort to better understand the fundamental factors that were contributing to continuing poor operational safety performance and identified 3 core causal effects. The first, lack of effective knowledge management and information integration across the workforce. The company determined that even with a well-defined corporate operational safety vision and the ongoing communication of policies and practices, the workforce mix of employees and contractors made it more difficult to effectively communicate, manage, and control the operational processes that needed to be employed for effective operational safety and risk management. 2, misalignment of policies and practices. Given the varied workforce mix across a very diverse operating environment, the existing operational safety policies and practices did not always align with how the business was being run. And finally, worker buy-in and active participation. With the operational safety vision driven by executive leadership and a strategy driven by the management team, the organization found that there were no structured mechanisms in place that effectively included the operating teams in proactive, much less real-time decision-making and ongoing change management. To address the challenges outlined, the company embarked on a journey to incorporate a workforce-centric solution to connect their natural network of workers to capture and communicate relevant operational information and insights. The company harnessed the intelligence of their workforce using MySafety to capture and communicate both structured and unstructured content across all areas of the enterprise. Through this, the company was able to engage the workforce at all levels and improve operational safety and risk practices. It improved transparency, providing lines of sight and insights across traditional boundaries in all areas of the company. As we can see from this slide, the results do speak for themselves. So in addition to achieving an ultimate goal in this pilot deployment of reducing risk and improving safety, this organization has seen a 1% decrease in failures. That financially, which fundamentally the CEO is focused on, has saved almost $3 million annually for the business. As this organization expands, they're anticipating a 10% decrease overall in failures, which will save the organization at least $27 million annually across the entire global business. Well, that's our quick view of how organizations should consider leveraging their most important, yet mostly untapped resource to better approach their safety and operational risk management practices and bridge the gap between process and practice, the insights of their workers. As organizations continue their journey of transformation, they must move beyond the process-centric approach to safety and operations risk management and embrace a worker-centric model to drive sustainable improvements in the business. My Safety helps drive this balance by proactively and continuously integrating the people piece as a core transformational component in their journey to operational excellence. I thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to Rosalind to see if we have any questions from the participants.
Thank you. We had a few questions come through. Let me just look at the console. Okay, this first question goes back to the beginning of the presentation. It says, you mentioned in one of your first slides the direct and indirect costs of failures. Can you provide some more detail on those items and what would be considered a direct or indirect cost?
Absolutely. So we have created a value calculator that looks at direct and indirect costs that an organization faced and can forecast. We've used this based on the fundamental components as defined by OSHA. And OSHA looks at direct costs, and this audience in particular is going to be intimately familiar with these factors, include things like worker compensation claims, which cover medical costs and indemnity payments, and also increased insurance costs. It's a challenge we see every day. Indirect costs can be a little more challenging for many organizations in that they include such things as wage, administrative, and overtime costs related to time lost through work stoppage. They're training costs for replacement workers. When we have injury and some of our most skilled staff are unable to work, we have to bring in replacement. Production can't stop. Schedules are sacrosanct. As a result, we oftentimes have to expend additional monies for training. There's obviously the lost productivity related to work scheduling, new employees' learning curves, and so on. And by far, a significant component of this is related to the cleanup, repair, and replacement costs of damaged material, machinery, and property. And these don't even include the other factors that at a gross level can be considered, such as lost production and profitability.
Thank you. Second question that's come through. You talked about the total workforce included both employees and contractors in the grouping. How can contractors be included when contractors are not allowed access to our systems and applications behind our corporate security firewall?
Great question. Having come from the legacy environmental health and safety world with several of my startup companies, common deployment that organizations have had, primarily because traditionally these deployments have been behind the firewall or on premise, is that the select few subject matter experts and managers are allowed access. But as we know, at an increasing level, more and more of our workforce is made up of contractors, and oftentimes these contractors aren't given access to those legacy EHS systems. In addition to some of the challenges in terms of usability beyond that. So we've worked with a number of companies, particularly those that have truly taken advantage of a global deployment of these legacy EHS systems, where contractors aren't allowed, where My Safety has been deployed both as a front-end tool as well as a back-end tool, because we are able to maintain a very strict security and privacy protocol process, so that we're oftentimes used, particularly because of our ease of use capabilities, as a front-end as well as a back-end communication vehicle for these legacy systems.
Excellent. Question number 3. You mentioned the importance of contextualizing data. Can you describe more specifically what you mean by that?
Sure, I'll try it. I think that if we look at most of the enterprise systems, and again focusing on either asset management, maintenance systems, or our legacy environmental health and safety management systems, as enterprise applications, fundamentally their goal is to collect data, and they do it well, with fairly structured workflows and processes. I think one of the biggest challenges we have as we're trying to align our KPIs and our performance metrics is that oftentimes it's really challenging to understand the true impact and value of that data, because they tend to be siloed bits of information. So what really contextualizing the data is to associate that collected content with other legacy applications or enterprise applications so that we can truly get some context for that data. You know, a great example that I try and give to folks is, you know, it's important if an event happens. You know, let's say we're doing a simple survey and 20% of the audience says no, and no is perceived to be a negative response. Well, it's less important to know that 20% said no, and it's more important to know the demographics of that 20% that said no. Because fundamentally, none of us are ever given an unlimited budget. We always have to be careful in terms of where we make our investment, regardless of whether it's related to the daily operations of the business or managing safety and reducing risk. So in understanding the context of how that information is collected and associating it with how the business is managed, the people that make up that business, that is a valuable set of information. It helps us understand better where to make critical investments that are going to have the most impact in the fastest manner.
This is a follow-up question that came through when you were discussing that, the first one. What system should a worker-centric technology integrate with?
You know, the fantasy that we all have is everything. You know, if you look at the basic tenets of a workforce-centric environment, it's going to be the people. So certainly from an upfront integration capacity, it's going to be the information about the people that make up our workforce. If it's employees, it's typically going to be the HR system. It could be a PeopleSoft, it could be a Workday, it could be an SAP. Oftentimes, organizations aren't tracking contractor information in these enterprise HR systems. So secondarily, it's going to be the information management tools that are used to track contractors. It could be you know, solutions such as Track that are managing the financial performance and activities of our contractors. It could be a system like RightCrowd, which is very fundamentally focused around you know, safety and security management of the people as they enter and depart a site or a plant or a facility. So I think fundamentally, when you're talking about a workforce-centric solution, it's got to be the information contained from systems that are managing our people, HR and contract management systems. Again, because we're striving for context, we also start to look at other systems. And I'd say the most common for us are going to be components of the legacy environmental health and safety systems. By far, incident management in terms of either, as the example I gave you, as a front end for these on-premise systems that aren't allowed access or don't provide access to contractors, being a front end, but also in terms of being able to communicate back-end results across the organization. You've also got other systems such as, you know, asset management, maintenance management systems. You've also got some of the more innovative technologies that deal with fatigue management and so on, things like that. There are many others, but those are just some specific examples.
Thank you. Next question. As a plant manager, I already have a lot of programs and strategies in place. What does this worker-centric perspective offer me that the others don't?
You know, I think fundamentally, again, as I mentioned, it helps bridge the gap between policy and practice. You know, fundamentally, as environmental health and safety professionals and practitioners, you know, fundamentally, our job is around risk management. And there's nothing more challenging that we deploy these risk managers, these HSE, EHS practitioners across a site, and oftentimes they're not necessarily perceived as partners. So I think an ongoing challenge that plant operations managers have is really helping to help the risk managers do their jobs better without the distrust or, you know, the lack of relationship. You know, here at the Verdantix Summit, which is an international market research firm focused on the HSE market, one of the common themes that went through the 4-day program was around this distrust, this lack of coordination, cooperations between operations and HSE. Well, if you can help to minimize that distrust, you can improve the participation of those that have the most distrust, which are the ones that are actually doing the job, then you're going to break that barrier. You're going to bridge that gap. You're going to provide the EHS risk managers with the type of information they need on a continuous basis so that they can better understand what's actually happening without walking through the facility and those secret hand signals of, the boss is around. At the same time, by engaging the workforce, seeking their insights, creating that transparency, there's nothing worse than being asked your opinion or being asked for your insight and never knowing what happens to it. So if you have that continual transparency, that communication from your HSE organizations, from your risk managers that are communicating back to those providing you that information, what happened? Was it valuable? Did it make a difference? What are you doing with it? Then you're breaking those barriers. And that's what we really mean by bridging that gap between process and practice. I hope that provides, a level of context for that one.
Thank you. I think we have time for a few more. How does this differ from the legacy systems I'm already using?
The legacy HSE systems in particular do an absolutely fantastic job at collecting information and reporting on that information. I think if you look at the history of these systems, even today, they were really born out of the day of compliance reporting. They were developed by subject matter experts that had the experience on what it took to collect and report on that information, particularly to regulatory bodies. And for better or for worse, as these systems have grown, as you've seen more integration between health and safety, product stewardship, in the environmental piece, all of which have many dimensions to them, they're still fundamentally structured and delivered as compliance collection information sources. And even more challenging, because they were developed by and for subject matter experts, their use and understanding can kind of be hard sometimes. So what we've tried to do is not replace these legacy systems because they're good. They've got fantastic workflows. They've got good integration amongst their individual components. But for the most part, they tend to be priority focused on managing their own silos of data. And given that we're an open platform where integration is one of the key elements, we can help facilitate the ease of use, the social business approach, and bring in the broader workforce to participate actively in these systems. As well, we also fill a gap that these systems don't do, which is that dialogue, that ongoing collaboration, that process by which you can identify your leaders, you can engage them, and through that engagement, you can get them more active in providing that proactive insight, which fundamentally could find their way back into these legacy systems. So we see ourselves very much as an open platform that can integrate with these as well as other enterprise applications. And if we do it well, and our customers can implement these successfully with their existing systems, because we're not advocating a replacement strategy, we're complementary. We can help create that innovation that many organizations are asking us about today.
I think this one is a good one to end today's webinar on. Can you give me a specific example of this in action? First, what is common today? What are the different results? Well,
I can actually talk specifically about an experience and an exchange that my team had just this week. One of our customers has a very robust incident management system. And as you all know, the very good incident management systems have very strong dynamic workflows. We report an incident, we investigate that incident at a high level, we determine and we define root cause, and then we define corrective and preventative actions. The real challenge this organization has had, and one we've heard fairly frequently, is once those corrective and preventative actions are defined, they're challenged with getting it out to the workforce. Now, typically, one of two things happens. One, they're emailed out to the workforce. Two, this information is maintained in some enterprise repository such as SharePoint, which are notoriously challenging to navigate. So fundamentally, the challenge that this EPC firm had was, you know, we're doing everything right, but most of the time, the workers aren't seeing this and they're not always understanding it. So we're not sure if what report we're reporting and we're providing to them is actually received and read, much less understood. We don't really have that feedback to understand if these learnings can be improved. So what they've done with My Safety is to integrate it with their corrective action, preventative action system, so that when a CAPA is created, i.e. the end of an incident management cycle, there's an automated trigger that we're able to then pull in a subset of the incident report and the corrective action, preventative action information, and then communicate it to the workforce. And in that communication, we can not only tell you who it was sent to, which is a typical email process, but we can tell you who received it. We can tell you who opened it. We can tell you who's reviewed it. And as well, to provide that added value to the subject matter experts, we can also associate with that a list of questions that can help the subject matter experts understand if it's understood and if there are ways that they can improve how they communicate these health, safety, and environment learnings. So we've been able to automate this by integrating it with an incident management system. When corrective action, preventative actions have defined, we provide a complete audit trail of who it goes to and the status of that delivery and receipt, all the way through review and completion of the feedback and insight requested by the subject matter experts. And more importantly, we're able to bring that back and report it with the context of the event and the people responding. And again, hopefully helping them understand where they can best utilize the limited investments they have to improve safety and reduce risk across the enterprise.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar. We're going to conclude on that question. Thank you for joining, and we hope to have another one in the future.